Hello everyone, this is G and I'm back with a new video. It's about 7:45 p.m. here in New York City. It's been a pretty warm day today. I guess our cold spring is transitioning into a warm summer. I guess for those who like the heat, that's great. I'm not a big fan of the heat, so this is going to be very difficult. I'm not a summer person. I'm a winter kid, January baby and all that. But anyway, quick order of business. So it does indeed look like Todd Garner, one of the producers for the newest Mortal Kombat film, MK 2021, is indeed in an echo chamber of his own making, freely admitting to bloxing, that's a good one, to blocking toxic people, right, and enjoying it. It's more satisfying than watching Dr. Pimple Popper. And if you just look over his page, you'll see that the only thing he's tweeting or retweeting are positive is positive reception to the film, which I expect. I get it. He has to make it look good. I understand that. But when you come online and you start gloating about blocking toxic people, right, and you don't provide proof of exactly what that toxic person is or what the toxicity is, I tend to believe that maybe the toxic person in this situation is you, right? Blocking, in my opinion, is not something one should be gloating about. But that's just me. But I do think this is a good segue to what I actually wanted to cover, right? Which is this, right? Actor, Star Trek. Let's say Star Wars. That's wrong. Star Trek actor Levar Burton, right? He's been on Star Trek. He was Kunta Kinte in Roots back in what the '80s. I think it was a miniseries in the '80s. He did Reading Rainbow. Right, he's had a long career. Says Star Trek actor LeVar Burton defends cancel culture, believes it has been misnamed, and suggests renaming it to consequence culture. Right. So this article it pretty much goes over like Dr. Seuss and how some of those books got canceled recently. And LeVar Burton apparently has done some business with the estate or organization that publishes the Seuss books. But I want to get to his comments, so I'm not gonna cover this whole article. You can read it. It'll be in the description. It'll be linked in the description as everything is with my videos, and you can look for yourself. But let's get to what he actually said. Right. So says here. Right. He says, in terms of cancel culture, Burton continued, I think it's misnamed. That's a misnomer, he says. The Star Trek actor proceeds to explain, I think we have a consequence culture, and that consequences are finally encompassing everybody in the society, whereas they haven't ever, where they haven't been ever in this country. I think that there are good signs that are happening in the culture right now. And I think it has everything to do with the new awareness on people who were simply unaware of the real nature of life in this country, for people who have been othered since this nation began, Burton concluded. And then it says here that he has doubled down on his statement. I said it and I stand by it, he says. Right, and we see here in terms of cancel culture, I think it's misnamed. We have a consequence culture, right? Here's the thing. So, says the article asks, what do you make of LeVar Burton's comments? Well, like most things, I have a very, uh, come on, I have a very nuanced take on it. So here's what I want to do, right? LeVar wants to say it's not cancel culture, right? He wants to say that it's consequence culture, right? And as he said earlier, it's people finally, getting uh, what they well not well. Let's look at what he actually said. I don't want to put words in his mouth, right? He said that he thinks it's good signs, that there are good signs that what are happening in the culture right now has everything to do with a new awareness on people who were unaware of the real nature of life in this country, for people who have been othered since the nation began. Right. So that's what he says apparently. Well, here's the thing, right? First of all, unless you know every single person in this country, right, and every single person who's been alive or dead since the founding of the nation in 1776, right, you can't say that. You can't say that there's a new awareness on people who were simply unaware of the real nature of life in this country, for people who have been othered, right, since the nation began. You don't know every single person's life story. It's not reasonable to say that. And if we're talking about modern day America, which is what we're talking about, right? The internet didn't exist in the 1700s, right? I want to know who these days is being othered in any serious way. It seems like everybody is fighting for and has a piece of the representation pie, right? Some get more represented than others. I'll give you that. These things are never even. Life itself is not even, right? I often use the example of a pizza, right? Life is not a pizza, right? It's not like you can just take a perfectly even slice for every person. That is not how life works, right? But unless he's actually had to fill out a form, and I've had to do this on occasion, where they don't give you an option to identify as more than one race, and you literally just have to choose one race, or you have to choose the other box. I don't know if an actor, and I'm not saying that Levar hasn't had his challenges, but I don't think that an actor who's been acting since what the 80s at least, so over 30 years, right? Who's if he's managed his money well, is probably sitting pretty in a nice house, much nicer than the small apartment I live in, right? I bet he's definitely not being othered, right? If I had to think of a group that's being othered or perhaps is forgotten in American society and doesn't get the say attention that they need, it would probably be groups like say the homeless, right? They're the ones who have no names, right? Tell me of a homeless person, right? That you know of who is as famous as Levar Burton, right? So maybe that group, right? The homeless, those who are mentally ill, things like that. Groups like that are the ones being othered. But when it comes to ethnicity, I don't really see it large and wide anymore. I'm not saying it never happened. We all know it happened. American history and the American present won't let you forget that it happened, right? But the question is, right, we can't, the question is not about the past. The question is about the present, right? And he's saying that, well, calling cancel culture was just consequence culture, right? Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. I could argue that too, right? Because consequence culture is literally a law of life itself. Everything that has been, that is, and that will be, including me, including you, including everybody that you know, is a result of consequence. And the consequence to the consequences to the consequences to the consequences. Some consequences are good, some are bad, right? Some consequences are just, some are unjust. Some consequences are fair, some are unfair, right? Sometimes an innocent person gets blamed for something they didn't do, and that's not a fair consequence. People don't think that's justice. And there are times when a guilty person, gets away with something, and that too is unfair, and that is not justice. But it is certainly a consequence, right? It can be a consequence of failures in law, failures in society, or various other things. So yeah, we do live in a consequence culture, Levar. It's called life itself, right? But we all know that what he's really talking about is cancel culture. Well, here's the way I look at it, right? If we're gonna have a cancel culture, right? He's saying that we have a consequence culture, right? So let's run with this for a minute. If we're gonna have a consequence culture, and perhaps it's my professional brain sort of sparking to life here as I talk, but if we're gonna have a consequence culture, well then we first need to come to a consensus. We need to come to a consensus about, you know, what the errors are, right? What is acceptable, what is unacceptable, and then for what is unacceptable, right? What is the most just and efficient way to handle it, right? There's a saying, I think. Let me see. Let me try to pull it up. It's by where are you? There's a saying by Aristotle. At least I think it's Aristotle. The internet tells me it's Aristotle. I don't know, right? But it says here, Anybody can be angry or can become angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person and to the right degree and at the right time and for the right purpose and in the right way, that is not within everyone's power and is not easy. Right? Now again, I have no idea if he actually said that, but I agree with the sentiment. And while it's talking about anger being measured out in an appropriate way, right? I would also agree and say this applies to the consequences, right? Of being punished for what is perceived to be a negative action, right? How do you know, right, that it's an actual um, appropriate thing to be punished for, right? A punishment, a consequence, a negative consequence needs to be just. It needs to be fair. It needs to be reasonable. For example, we understand, generally speaking, that say, oh, I don't know. Let's take a real world event that everybody's been talking about. That let's say you take a knife and you try to attack two people in front of a cop, and the cop shoots you and you die. That is indeed consequence culture, right? But many people don't want to accept the consequences of that. But if one looks at it objectively, in my opinion, that's a fair consequence. When you attack a person with a deadly weapon, and the peacekeeper, because that's what the police are supposed to be, they're supposed to be a peacekeeping force, right, sees you attacking them with a deadly weapon and they have a deadly weapon, it is reasonable to assume that the person with the deadly weapon who does have the right to kill in extreme circumstances may draw their weapon to stop you from killing someone else, right? So the first question is, right, is the offense what first of all, what is the offense, right? What is acceptable behavior, what is unacceptable behavior? And then you have to look and go, okay, what is the appropriate measure of punishment, right? Of response, right? How do you get that right? How do you make sure it's attributed to the right person for the right crime? And then you have to determine, okay, how long, right, should this person be punished for, right? For example, there have been cases where, what was it? I think it was two writers for Teen Vogue or whatever. They got fired for tweets that they made as teenagers. Is that just? Is that fair? Is that reasonable? Is it fair to bring up something that they said as kids and use it as proof against them and use it to cost them their jobs, right? As adults, it's a consequence, but the question is it a fair consequence, right? Is the punishment, which is losing their jobs, a fair and appropriate consequence? Is it a consequence that will be applied consistently? I'm not going to say uniformly because nothing's ever applied uniformly, but will it be applied consistently if someone else makes that error? Another one is, say, Gina Carano, right? Losing her job, losing her role as Cara Dune on The Mandalorian because of her social and political opinions, in particular using an image referencing World War II and Nazi Germany and what happened to the Jews. Right? Many are of the opinion that while it's certainly a consequence of her actions, that many feel it's an unfair consequence, that she shouldn't have been punished for simply expressing an opinion. Right? There is that. And even those who believe that she was out of bounds by referencing the Holocaust feel that, well, if Disney were being consistent, well, then they would have to also fire Pedro Pascal, who's also used Nazi World War II imagery, right? In also making very social and political tweets. Yet only she was fired, right? So there are so many things you have to consider when you talk about consequence culture, right? Because people need to feel safe. Do you need to punish wrongdoers? Yes, there are certainly certain things that should be shunned, right? And here's the thing: cancel culture does have some W's. I'm not gonna act like it doesn't. For example, if it wasn't for cancel culture, you wouldn't have things like Me Too and Time's Up and people in Hollywood like Harvey Weinstein probably would not have been outed for their crimes, right? Harvey Weinstein and Jeff Epstein and many others, right? What's his name? Oh, jeez. It's not Tom Hanks, although Tom apparently is in some trouble. But Kevin Spacey. Right there we go. Right, and others. So I'm not gonna say that it's never done anything good, but you know, does the good outweigh the bad? Because many people have many people have lost their jobs, right, unfairly and unjustly. Many would say people have been accused of things that they weren't guilty of. That's happened in several colleges, right? And then of course you have things like say Nick Sandman, right? What was it, a year or 2 years ago, right? Cancel culture came for him hard just because he happened to stand there awkwardly while an old Native American dude pounded a drum in his face. Right? He did literally nothing. He said nothing, but because he had a MAGA hat on, everybody, including Kathy Griffin, wanted his head. Well, he's now millions upon millions of dollars richer because at least some of the media was held accountable for what they did. But here's the thing: for any good that cancel culture does, or consequence culture, as Levar puts it, right? It seems like they've done more and more and more and more damage. Again, in the entertainment sphere, you see things like the attempted cancellation of 6 Days in Fallujah, which is something I've covered several times, and I've said repeatedly, you don't have to like the game, you don't have to support it, but it has a right to exist. Cancel culture or consequence culture, as Levar puts it, says no, right? And again, we saw a consequence culture rear its head earlier when Troy Levitt was discovered to be working on a Harry Potter game, and then people campaigned to cancel him, and he ended up stepping down from his role. So from my perspective, right, and I know I'm just a little person, I'm just a little old grump sitting in a small room in New York City. But if my opinion means anything, well then, Mr. Burton, I strongly disagree with your consequence culture because your consequence culture doesn't know any bounds. It doesn't have any rules. It doesn't have anything to check its power. And it does have very real power. When people can lose their real life jobs for what they say on the internet, then it certainly has power, right? And that's the thing about cancel culture or consequence culture, as Levar wants to put it. A lot of the people who use it misuse it and they are drunk on power. It isn't about actually helping people, right? Or outing those who are guilty of serious wrongs. It's often about abuse and power and control. There's a reason why it's referred to as things like cry bullying, right? It tries to look virtuous and helpful on its surface, but inside, right, its motivations are nothing but dark. I don't see where, by and large, cancel culture and the hyper reactive way people have become online, myself included at times, has helped discourse of any type, whether it be about a TV show or whether it be about politics, and increasingly, right, to the chagrin of many, myself included, politics and entertainment keep making having very graphic sex and making love to each other right in front of us, and people don't want to see it. And yet it keeps being pushed in our faces. It's very difficult these days to have an honest conversation because, as we saw with Todd Garner, right, people will block you if you challenge their assertion, if you challenge their opinion. And if they don't block you, they will insult you because you disagree with them, which is something I've experienced a lot uh, online because I tend to challenge people and I'm competitive by nature, so I never know when to shut up. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. Here's what I want to know, Mr. Burton. Right? Who should look into these instances of violations of consequence culture? You? Right? Should we train people on how to do this? Right? Because I've been at my job. I work in the compliance office in a college. I've been at my job for 10 years now, across two schools, had four supervisors in that time. Right? And in each instance where there's a case and someone's accused of something, right, we have to do a thorough investigation We have to hear from the accuser, from the accused, from people who may have information, right? And then take all that information and come to a conclusion, right? So we have to be very detailed and very nuanced. And so I want to know, Mr. Burton. Hey, BB. I want to know, Mr. Burton, who is going to do this in your consequence culture? Who's going to be assigned? What team is going to be assigned to be a fact finder and to actually talk to people and find out if they said what they said, and if they did, why they said what they said, right? Or should we just believe people on certain grounds? Believe all women, believe all POC, believe this, believe that, believe everything except the truth, which is often hard to come by when everybody's got an agenda. I don't agree with that, Mr. Burton. I don't agree with simply believing someone because they say something and, oh, there must be a woman. That means they could never lie. Or, oh, they're a POC and their racial group has a history of oppression in America. They would never lie. No, I don't abide by that. Gene don't play that, right? Homie don't play that, and Gene don't play that, right? Gene wants to hear all sides of a matter as much as that is possible and available, depending on the situation, right? Gene wants to ask why someone did what they did and then said what they said, right? Because I've seen situations where people are accused of things and they might be technically guilty of them, but then you realize why they did it and you get a bit more of an understanding. For example, and I have to be very vague with this because, again, it's related to my professional job, but there was a case years ago where one person accused another of being racist toward them. And through the investigation, we discovered that, yeah, the person did use a racial slur in a conversation. That conversation was during an intense argument between the two people, where they were both shouting very mean words and racist slurs at each other because they were mad as hell and they were arguing. Saying racial slurs in the heat of an argument doesn't automatically make you a racist, but this is what the person who had been accused was accused of, right? Because the initial person, the person who made the accusation, didn't want to tell us the whole story at first. But we got the whole story because we spoke to the accused and we spoke to other people and said, oh, it was a big fight. They had a big blow up, right? It was a huge argument. They were both saying things that they shouldn't say, right? And they both ended up being counseled for it because they were both in the wrong. But nobody was written down to be a racist. Why? Because we actually looked into it. We didn't just take a person at their word. We tried to find out as much as we could what the whole situation was. And I'd rather live in that type of culture than the cancel culture or consequence culture that Levar um, embodies, right? Or at least he supports. And here's another thing, right? Cancel culture is noted for its lack of empathy and ability to forgive. So, what if you have someone, right, in Levar's consequence culture? What if you have somebody who sincerely was an hysterophobe, right? Racist, sexist, anti gay, anti trans, whatever. And they made these positions well known online. But through a very fortunate series of events in their life, they came to see just how wrong they were. And they changed their ways, and now they've disavowed everything that they once sincerely believed in, right? They've disavowed that very real and sincere hate. Should we still hold it against them? Should we still cancel them? Should we still make it difficult for them to find a job or to be accepted back into society by smearing their reputation in a public space, which is what the internet is, right? And constantly bringing up what they used to believe in, even when they have made every attempt to show that they've changed and to make amends for their actions, if such a thing can be done. Do you think that someone like Daryl Davis could have helped people leave the Ku Klux Klan, a very real and at one time very powerful actual white supremacist hate group that is well known to Americans and to non-Americans, right? And their destructive and hurtful and harmful impact on American history, in particular American race relations. Do you think that Daryl Davis, a black man, could have reached out to these white people if he had the type of mindset that uh, Levar supports? One that says, once you are damned forever, right? Do you think he could have helped those people who have left the Klan because of knowing him? Do you think he could have had that type of impact? I don't think so. I don't think so. And that's why I cannot support the consequence culture that Levar uh, believes in, or at least professes in public to believe in. Because cancel culture is not about rehabilitation, it does not include forgiveness. It's about abuse and control and condemnation and damnation, right? It's about condemning you to the deepest pits of hell with absolutely no hope of getting out, of being redeemed. And as a religious person, as a Christian, I believe very much in the power of redemption. And I cannot support something that does not allow a prodigal son or a prodigal daughter to come home. But anyway, that's the video. Please let me know what you think, and I will see you all in the next one. Have a good day or night wherever you are. See you around. Bye.